Catherine had never been one to believe in ghosts or supernatural forces. She was practical, grounded, a woman of science and reason. But as she stepped out of the car and gazed at the old, dilapidated house nestled deep in the woods, something inside her stirred, a gut feeling she couldn't explain. It was as if the house was waiting for her, and not in a welcoming way. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The sun had just begun to set, casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches stretching out in odd, unnatural angles, as if trying to grasp something just beyond reach. Catherine adjusted the strap of her backpack, glancing over at her husband, Tom. He seemed unfazed, his usual confident smile plastered on his face. "This place is perfect for what we need, right?" he asked, though it seemed more like a rhetorical question than anything else. Catherine didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on the house ahead. The building was a Victorian-era monstrosity with peeling paint, broken windows, and an eerie, almost unearthly silence surrounding it. The large front door was ajar, creaking faintly in the wind. It felt like an invitation and an omen. "I suppose so," she said at last, forcing a smile. "It's just bigger than I imagined." The idea of spending the next few weeks here, isolated in this strange, almost forgotten corner of the world, had initially sounded like a good one. They had been looking for a retreat, a place far away from the hustle of city life where Catherine could focus on her writing, and Tom could finish his latest architectural project. A perfect escape. The ad for the place had been simple and quaint, isolated Victorian mansion for rent. Perfect for creative souls in need of solitude, and quaint, the price was reasonable, especially given its size and the picturesque location. But now that they were here, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong. "Let's take a look inside," Tom said, already heading toward the door. Catherine hesitated for a moment before following him. The path to the front door was overgrown with wild grass and tangled vines, and the porch creaked under their weight as they ascended. She glanced over her shoulder at the darkening woods behind them. The trees seemed to shift in the growing dusk, their outlines blurring and warping in ways that made her feel dizzy. "Come on, Cat, what's the matter?" Tom called out from the doorway, his voice light and teasing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Don't say that," she muttered, forcing a chuckle as she hurried to catch up with him. When she stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was the smell. It wasn't musty or damp, like she had expected. Instead, there was something faintly metallic in the air, as though the house itself had been holding its breath for a long time. The entryway was grand, with a sweeping staircase leading up to the second floor, and walls adorned with faded portraits of long-dead ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow them with unsettling precision. "Well, it's certainly old," Catherine said, running her fingers along the cracked wood of a nearby table. Tom didn't respond immediately. He was already heading down the long hallway toward the back of the house. Catherine followed him, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping up her spine. "This place is amazing," Tom said, his voice filled with awe. "I mean, just look at the architecture. This could be a great project for me." "Yeah, it's definitely got character," Catherine replied, though her words felt hollow in her own ears. The house was much larger than they had anticipated. High ceilings, grand fireplaces, and rooms that seemed to stretch on forever. Most of the furniture was covered in dust sheets. though there were signs of more recent habitation: half-empty glasses on tables, discarded clothing, and strange symbols drawn on the walls in chalk. "Looks like someone left in a hurry," Catherine remarked, eyeing the symbols. They didn't look like any kind of art she'd seen before, more like a mix of crude runes and unsettling images. "Maybe it's just the place's charm," Tom said with a grin. "You've got to admit, it's a bit more than we expected." Catherine forced a smile but couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong here. The house was too still. It felt as though it was holding its breath, as though it was alive in a way that made her skin crawl. "Do you think this place is safe?" Catherine asked, her voice low as she surveyed the room. The air was thick, heavy with something she couldn't identify. Tom waved her off. "It's just an old house. It's probably been abandoned for years, and now it's waiting for someone like us to bring it back to life." But Catherine wasn't so sure. That night, after settling into their respective rooms, Catherine tried to shake off the unease that had settled into her bones. The house creaked and groaned around them, but it wasn't until she lay in bed, staring up at the high, dark ceiling, that she began to hear the whispers. At first, it was so faint that she wondered if she had imagined it. A soft, rustling sound in the walls, like the movement of paper or the scratching of nails. Then came the words, low and indistinct, though she could just make out the faintest syllables. "Help us." Her heart raced, and she sat up, straining to listen. The whispers grew louder, though still muffled, as though coming from far away. She got out of bed and crept to the door, opening it a crack. The hallway was dark, save for a sliver of light spilling from under Tom's door. She knocked softly, but there was no response. Her pulse quickened. She knew something wasn't right, but what could it be? The whispers continued. She felt an overwhelming urge to follow them. Against her better judgment, Catherine moved down the hallway, her bare feet barely making a sound on the floorboards. The air was colder now, and she shivered, pulling her sweater tighter around her. The whispers were stronger now, though still indistinct, like a distant chant. She reached the staircase and paused. Something was pulling her downward, though her rational mind screamed at her to turn back. Every step she took seemed to make the house groan louder, the walls seeming to constrict around her as she descended. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in the hallway near the back of the house. There was a door here, one that was slightly ajar, leading into a dark room. The whispers came from within. Without thinking, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was freezing cold. A small light flickered from a single candle placed in the center of a long, rectangular table. Around the table were strange symbols, etched into the floor and walls. But it wasn't the symbols that caught her attention, it was the shadows. There, standing in the far corner of the room, were figures. Not quite human, but not entirely alien either. They were tall and gaunt, their skin an ashen gray, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Help us," one of them whispered, its voice a haunting, rasping sound. Catherine froze, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no mistaking it now. The house was alive, and it wasn't just the walls that whispered. It was the souls of those trapped within it. The shadows moved toward her,